It was 3:02 a.m. Most of the country was silent, suspended in sleep. From the snowy rooftops of Michigan to the deserts of Arizona, from lonely truck stops off I-70 to quiet nursing homes in Florida, America was in slumber. Even the news cycle had slowed. There were no sirens, no push notifications, no breaking headlines. Only the steady hum of refrigerators, the quiet ticking of clocks, the stillness of the night. But behind one locked door in a gilded suite at Mar-a-Lago, a man sat upright, surrounded by silence and rage. The curtains were half drawn. The room smelled faintly of old cigar smoke in desperation. His tie was off, his collar undone, but the fury in his eyes burned like stadium lights. The only thing that moved was his right thumb scrolling, tapping, typing. Donald J. Trump couldn't sleep. Not tonight. Not after what he saw on Twitter. Not after that man posted that meme. It had started as a simple joke, a sly, sarcastic jab from Governor Gavin Newsom. But Trump didn't laugh. He never does when he's not in control. To him, it wasn't a meme, it was war, a public humiliation, an insult aired to millions. And worse, he had no comeback, no microphone, no crowd, just his phone and his fury. He read the post again, then again, then again. Each time, the humiliation burned deeper. And in that moment at 3:02 a.m., he snapped. This wasn't politics anymore. This was personal. He opened Truth Social. The screen glowed against the darkness. He didn't draft. He didn't edit. He attacked. His fingers flew like a storm, punching words drenched in resentment, fueled by obsession. Words that would soon reach millions. Words that would echo far beyond Florida. And words that would change everything. By the time the sun rose, America would wake up to something more than just morning headlines. They would wake up to the unraveling of a man who once sat in the highest office on earth, now unraveling in the dark alone with a tweet. Why was he online at 3:00 in the morning? That question haunted more than a few political staffers in newsrooms when they woke up hours later. But the truth is simple, and it's more dangerous than it sounds. Because Donald Trump wasn't trying to sleep. He was trying to win an argument, a headline, a feeling of control. He sat in his darkened room, the only source of light coming from the glow of his phone screen. That blue-white light made his skin look pale, almost ghost-like. His face was tight, his jaw clenched, his thumb moved fast but not steady. He wasn't thinking, he was reacting. Every word he typed dripped with frustration, soaked in wounded pride, because it wasn't just Newsom's meme that bothered him. It was the silence after. No advisors rushing in to defend him, no crowds cheering. Just nothing. Alone with his phone, Trump was spiraling. And in that spiral, he turned to the only weapon he had left: words. Unfiltered, unhinged. Posted in the middle of the night for the whole world to see. This wasn't a strategy. It was an emotional outburst in real time from a man who once ruled with absolute confidence, now pacing the edge of political irrelevance. And that glow from his phone, it wasn't just light. It was fuel for the fire inside him. He didn't hesitate. His thumb moved with sharp, bitter certainty. He typed it fast without thinking twice. No drafts, no filters, just raw, unchecked rage. End mail-in voting. Go paper. 12 words. That's all it took. 12 words that shook the foundation of America's democratic system, typed not by a conspiracy theorist in a dark corner of the internet, but by a former president of the United States. And not just any president, but the one who once stood on the Capitol steps, hand over heart swearing, to protect the very system he now sought to dismantle. What he posted wasn't just an opinion. It was a direct attack, because mail-in voting isn't a loophole. It's a lifeline for soldiers serving overseas, for seniors, confined at home, for workers pulling night shifts, for every American whose voice depends on access, not privilege. But Trump didn't care about that. He cared about winning, and in his world, if democracy gets in the way of power, it's democracy that must go. He hit post, and with that simple action, something irreversible began. His supporters would echo it, his critics would gasp, and millions still asleep would wake to find that the rules had changed again. Because when a former president attacks voting itself, it's not just policy, it's war. 3:02 a.m. and a digital firestorm had just been unleashed. Why Newsom? Why would a former president, once the most powerful man on earth, lose sleep over a state governor? The answer is psychological and deeply personal. Because Gavin Newsom is everything Donald Trump can't stand, not because of policy, not because of partisanship, but because of what he represents: youth, elegance, confidence without arrogance, charisma without chaos. And above all, no fear. Newsom doesn't flinch, not at insults and not at threats, and definitely not at Trump. To Trump, that's not just annoying, it's insulting, because for a man who spent decades demanding loyalty, dominance, and control, Gavin Newsom is a walking rejection of everything Trump has ever stood for. He's younger but more composed. He's progressive but polished. He leads without theatrics, and he trolls with surgical precision. In a way, Newsom is Trump's worst nightmare, not because he's louder, but because he's smarter. He doesn't yell, he doesn't rage. He doesn't beg the crowd for attention. He lets Trump unravel himself. That's what Trump saw in that meme. Not just a joke, but a mirror. A reflection of what he fears most. Relevance slipping away. Respect being redirected. Power being mocked. And in that reflection, Trump didn't just see Gavin Newsom. He saw a future that no longer needed him. This wasn't the first time Gavin Newsom got under Trump's skin. It's been years in the making, a slow, deliberate series of jabs delivered with a smile and surgical timing. Let's rewind the tape. The Wildfire 8 incident. Back in 2018, California was burning. While entire communities were reduced to ash, Trump publicly threatened to cut off federal wildfire relief. His reasoning? He blamed California's poor forest management. But Newsom didn't flinch. Instead, he tweeted, "You don't believe in climate change. We do. That's why we're cleaning up the mess you deny exists." It went viral, over 2 million likes. And Trump's silent for 48 hours, a political eternity. The COVID response showdown in 2020, while Trump downplayed COVID-19, called it just the flu, Newsom took a hardline approach, shutdowns, mandates, science-first messaging. And every time Trump held a rally without masks, Newsom's office posted photos of empty stadiums. Hashtag leadership looks different. Another burn, another headline. The Fox News interview flip in 2023, when Trump appeared on Fox and said Gavin Newsom is trying to run for president behind Biden's back. Newsom replied live at a press briefing, "Behind Biden's back. No need, I say it to his face. Unlike some people, I don't hide behind hashtags and handlers." Even Republicans chuckled. Trump seethed in silence. These weren't just political comebacks. They were personal counters, each one crafted to provoke, to sting, to remind Trump that he was no longer untouchable. And now fast forward to August 20th. Newsom posts a meme, 3 snowflake emojis. No caption, no explanation. Just 3 icy symbols mocking Trump's sensitivity. It was subtle, elegant, ruthless. And for Trump, it wasn't just another insult. It was the last straw. Because when the crowd stops laughing with you and starts laughing at you, there's nothing more dangerous than a man whose pride is bleeding at 3 a.m. When a man starts yelling into the void at 3 a.m., it's not strength you're seeing. It's fear. It's loneliness. It's the unraveling of a man used to ruling by force but now ruled by emotion. Trump didn't stop after the first post. He kept going, post after post, all caps, no logic, no restraint, just pure frantic energy. He made up numbers. He declared fake victories. He praised redistricting schemes as great wins for democracy, while simultaneously demanding an end to mail-in ballots, calling them fraud without bounds. It didn't make sense, because it wasn't meant to. This wasn't strategy. It was reaction, impulse, desperation. And the more he posted, the more obvious it became Donald Trump wasn't trying to lead anymore. He was trying to matter. That's the tragedy, because when power slips from the hands of a man who built his image on dominance, he doesn't fade with grace. He fights the shadows. And those shadows, they looked a lot like Gavin Newsom. This wasn't the behavior of a statesman. It was the tantrum of a man alone with his ego. It echoed something darker. It echoed history. Men like him don't go quietly. We've seen it before, leaders who scream louder when they feel smaller, who rewrite facts when reality rejects them, who claim victimhood while wielding power like a sword. And the more Trump posted, the more he looked like them. Not a president, but a warning. At first glance, it looked like another rant. Midnight, all caps, buzzwords, end mail-in voting, go to paper ballots. And then the line that stopped political analysts cold, well, gain 100 more seats, 100. That's not just a number, that's a threat. Because in the House of Representatives, 100 seats flipping would be a political earthquake. It would mean not just a red wave, but a red tsunami. It would mean total control. It would mean no more resistance, no more hearings, no more accountability. But here's what's more disturbing. Trump doesn't explain how those seats would flip. He doesn't reference polls. He doesn't cite voters. He cites tactics. He says end mail-in voting, switch to paper. Then we'll gain 100 seats. This isn't a campaign strategy. It's conditional authoritarianism. It's the logic of someone who believes if the current system doesn't guarantee my win, I will change the system. That line 100 seats is not based on facts. It's based on control. He's not inspiring voters, has bypassing them. It's a message to his base, yes. But more importantly, it's a warning to democracy itself. If you don't bend the rules for me, it'll break them. Trump says ending mail-in voting will save democracy. But for millions of Americans, it does the opposite. Let's talk about who gets hurt. Veterans. They served overseas. They fought in deserts, jungles, and frozen mountain passes. Many still serve abroad, stationed far from home. For decades, mail-in voting was their only connection to democracy. And now Trump wants to cut that cord. The elderly. Not everyone can drive. Not everyone can stand in line for hours. Not everyone has the strength to face the chaos of polling places. Mail-in voting is not a luxury to them. It's survival. Low-income workers, single moms juggling 2 jobs, men working night shifts, Americans without flexible hours or reliable transportation. For them, Election Day isn't a day off. It's another shift, another bill, another sacrifice. Communities of color. Let's be honest. Black, Latino, Native, and immigrant communities have always faced barriers. Fewer polling stations, longer lines, voter ID challenges. Mail-in voting helped level the field, and now Trump wants to rip that field away. This isn't about election security. It's about election access. And when you strip away mail-in ballots, you're not protecting democracy. You're protecting power by silencing those most in need of a voice. It's not just political strategy. It's systemic exclusion. And the people who suffer, they're not on cable news. They're not trending, but they are real, and they are the reason voting matters. If this all sounds familiar, it's because it is. Trump's obsession with ending mail-in voting, his push for stricter rules, limited access, and voter intimidation, it echoes something darker. It sounds like Jim Crow. That wasn't just a time in history. It was a system built on fear, control, and exclusion. A system that said, some people matter, others don't. And now we're seeing the same tactics return, but with new packaging. Back then, they used poll taxes and literacy tests. Now it's voter ID laws and ballot restrictions. Back then, they had armed men outside polling stations. Now it's election observers trained to intimidate. Back then, they claimed it was to keep elections honest. Now they say the same thing, same lie, different century. When Trump says stop mail-in voting, he's not talking about fairness. He's talking about filtering who gets to vote. And that filter, it cuts out the same people. It always has black voters, brown voters, poor voters, loud voices that challenge power. And let's ask the uncomfortable question, is Trump trying to make America great again? Or make America segregated again? Because you can't claim to love democracy if you're working this hard to decide who's allowed in it. Trump had just fired off post after post, shouting into the void, demanding attention. Angry, exposed, unraveling. And then came Newsom's reply. Not a press conference, not a 5-paragraph tweet, no hashtags, no rants, just 3 emojis. That's it, 3 snowflakes. And it hit like a sniper shot. Because if you know anything about political culture, you know what snowflake means. For years, conservatives weaponized the word against liberals, calling them weak, soft, overly sensitive. Snowflakes melt under pressure, they mocked. But now Newsom flipped the script. He didn't call Trump a snowflake. He didn't have to. He just dropped the symbols. Let the meaning speak for itself. And the result, devastating. The silence screamed louder than any insult. It said, you're fragile, you can't take a joke, you've lost control. And Trump, he knew it. He was triggered publicly, unmistakably, and completely. That one emoji-laced post became viral within minutes. It wasn't just trolling. It was psychological warfare, and Trump was losing. The moment Newsom hit post, the internet exploded. Every newsroom picked it up. CNN ran it. MSNBC dissected it. Even Fox News reluctantly had to acknowledge it. But it wasn't just media coverage. It was momentum. It was mood. Because for the first time in a long time, Donald Trump wasn't dominating the story. He was the story, the punchline, the one being laughed at, not feared. And Gavin Newsom, he didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't even have to insult anyone. He used silence, symbols, precision. While Trump flailed wildly at 3 a.m., Newsom moved like a scalpel, sharp, quiet, devastating. The public noticed. Comment sections flooded with applause. Memes spread like wildfire. The phrase triggered by 3 emojis trended on Twitter for hours. And with that, Newsom didn't just win the exchange. He reframed the battlefield. He showed that the loudest man in the room isn't always the one in control. That chaos doesn't equal strength. That sometimes power is knowing exactly when to say nothing at all. Trump didn't just lose a round. He lost the crowd. It wasn't just a meme. It wasn't just a moment. It was a message and millions heard it without a single word being spoken. Because that's the power of symbolism in the digital age. A well-timed image, a 3 emoji reply, a post without a caption, but with everything it needed to say. Within minutes, Newsom's snowflake tweet was on every political blog, every cable network, every timeline. But here's the key: it didn't go viral because it was loud. It went viral because it was precise. It didn't insult Trump. It exposed him. It didn't scream. It humiliated. It didn't attack his policies. It attacked his ego, the very thing he holds dearest. And the public saw it. They didn't need a debate to understand what was happening. They could feel it. This was no longer a battle of facts and figures. This was a battle of emotional intelligence, and Trump had brought a hammer to a chess match. Newsom played it clean, played it smart, and played it for millions to witness. He didn't silence Trump. He made Trump irrelevant. And that was the slap. Not with words, but with perception, not with volume, but with mastery. It wasn't a leak. It wasn't a hidden recording. It wasn't a whistleblower. It was Trump himself, typing, posting, admitting. For years, people debated. Was Trump just careless with words? Was it all performance, or did he really mean it? Now we know, because on that quiet August night, Trump didn't just oppose mail-in voting. He didn't just question election security. He openly called for the dismantling of democratic access. He cheered redistricting that would benefit one party. He claimed that ending mail-in voting would guarantee 100 extra seats. That's not reform. That's rigging. That's not democracy. That's domination. He wasn't pretending anymore. There was no coded language, no subtlety, just raw, unapologetic intent. He meant it. He wants it. And he said it out loud. This was the moment where even the fence-sitters, the hesitant defenders, though maybe he didn't mean it like that crowd, they had nowhere to hide. Because the truth wasn't whispered. It was shouted, typed in bold, and pinned to the top of his profile. And once truth is exposed, there's no putting it back in the box. There was a time when Donald Trump's words were gospel, every tweet a thunderclap, every statement a battle cry. His supporters didn't just believe him, they followed him. Loyalty wasn't requested, it was demanded. And he got it. But that night, something changed. People didn't just question what he said, they questioned why he said it. Even some of his most loyal followers, conservative commentators, local GOP leaders, ex-administration allies, began to shift in tone. Why is he still obsessing over this? We're supposed to be moving forward, not backwards. This isn't strength, it's insecurity. And just like that, the cracks began to show. Because absolute power doesn't collapse in a single explosion. It rots slowly, quietly from the inside. Trump's personal media machine, the echo chamber he built through rallies, retweets, and right-wing platforms, started glitching. The same influencers who once amplified his message now hesitated. Some fell silent, others turned away. The spell was breaking. Because when a leader becomes too obsessed with staying relevant, they forget how to lead. And when the image cracks, so does the illusion of control. Trump didn't just cross a line. He exposed the fragility of the empire he built. And in the silence that followed, even his base began to ask, is he still fighting for us or just for himself? For years, silence was the rule inside the Republican Party. Not because everyone agreed with Trump, but because they feared him, feared his tweets, feared his base, feared being called disloyal and primaried out of existence. And so they played along, even when they disagreed, even when their conscience screamed. But this time something cracked. That 3 a.m. post didn't just expose Trump. It exposed the moral fatigue of a party exhausted from defending the indefensible. Behind closed doors, murmurs turned into questions. Is this the hill we really want to die on? How do we explain this to our voters back home? What happened to the conservative values we used to stand for? And then the first few voices spoke up. Not loud, not aggressive, but different. Senators issuing carefully worded statements. Former allies tweeting veiled criticisms. Even right-wing pundits asking, are we helping the country or just enabling one man's spiral? It wasn't a rebellion. Not yet. but it was a shift. And in Washington, shifts matter, because one senator asking questions today could be 10 by next month, and 10 could become the turning point. Power doesn't disappear overnight, but legitimacy, that can vanish in a moment of silence. And right now, that silence is growing inside the very party that once feared to speak. America has seen this before. Different decade, same pattern. When power feels threatened, they attack the vote. In the post-Reconstruction South, Black Americans who once voted were suddenly erased by laws they never got to vote on. Jim Crow wasn't just about water fountains. It was about power, about keeping the ballot out of the hands of the unwanted, poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, and behind it all, fear. Fear that democracy, if truly equal, might shift who holds the reins. Now, decades later, that fear is back, dressed in new suits, with cleaner language. But the message is the same: some votes matter more than others, and some people shouldn't vote at all. So when Trump posts at 3 a.m. openly threatening election officials, openly suggesting we toss out ballots, it's not just political chaos. It's historical déjà vu, because we've been here before. And each time, the silence of the good paved the way for the boldness of the cruel. If we don't remember those pages, we're not just doomed to repeat them, we're already halfway through the first chapter again. Where were they? When Trump threatened to terminate parts of the Constitution, where were the senators? When he posted lies about rigged elections again and again, where were the governors? When he called for protests at counting centers, when he flirted with violence disguised as patriotism, when he treated the ballot like a punchline, where were they? We heard from activists, we heard from young people, from journalists, from everyday citizens. But the voices that should have thundered chose silence. Not all, but too many, and silence from the top. That's not neutral. That's a signal to extremists you can keep going, a signal to the public. Maybe this isn't such a big deal, a signal to history we didn't learn a damn thing. Because here's the truth. Silence is a strategy. It's safer to wait, safer to avoid backlash, safer to protect your future run for office than protect the Constitution itself. But history remembers the quiet ones too, just not kindly. We've seen this before. Men shouting with red hats and rage in their eyes, waving American flags while storming the Capitol, calling it freedom. Bullies with megaphones at voting booths claiming they were protecting democracy. Elected leaders lying on live TV telling us they were saving the country. But let's call it what it is. It's not patriotism to deny your neighbor's vote. It's not bravery to attack truth tellers. It's not loyalty to America when your loyalty is only to one man. Real patriotism isn't loud, it isn't violent, and it doesn't need a red hat or a flag the size of a truck. Real patriotism is protecting the truth, especially when it's inconvenient. Newsom didn't call them names. He didn't raise his voice. He simply asked, is this who we are? Or is this what we were warned about? And in that moment, you could feel the room shift. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is name the lie, even when it's draped in stars and stripes. There was no explosion, no breaking news alert, no smoking gun, just a slow silence. One by one, donors stopped returning calls. One by one, former allies chose vacation over rallies. And one by one, the headlines changed. Not Trump leads, but Trump reacts. Not Trump commands, but Trump blames. Because here's the truth, Donald Trump is no longer leading a movement. He's chasing its anger, begging it to stay angry enough to still need him. But the crowd has changed. They don't want strategy. They want vengeance. They don't want direction. They want blood. And so Trump follows not because he has a vision, but because he's afraid of being forgotten. The king didn't fall from the throne. He just became irrelevant to the mob he created. And that's how empires truly collapse. Here's what we must take away: no one should ever hold too much power without oversight. Even a president can become dangerous if the only limit is his own conscience or lack thereof. Democracy is not a gift. It is a responsibility. It is fragile and requires constant care. When leaders act unchecked, even subtle shifts like restricting voting, spreading misinformation, or manipulating the system can erode the foundation of the nation. And here's the hardest truth. It's not just the loud voices of the opposition that protect freedom. It's the quiet, courageous ones, those who question, observe, and speak up even when it's uncomfortable. History has taught us when we fail to hold the powerful accountable, we allow mistakes to repeat, and sometimes we pay with our democracy itself. So remember, voting, civic engagement, and speaking truth to power aren't optional. They are the backbone of freedom, because the fight for democracy doesn't end at the ballot box. It's fought every day by each citizen, by every institution, and by those who choose courage over convenience. Have you ever stayed silent when someone's rights were under attack? When you saw injustice and thought, "It's not my problem," or "I'll speak later," that hesitation, that quiet nodding along it matters. It builds momentum for those who would manipulate, deceive, and dominate. Ask yourself, could a single midnight tweet change the way your ballot counts? Could one moment of inattention alter the course of history? This story isn't just about Trump. It's about all of us, every citizen, every voice, every moment you choose to act or choose to stay silent, because democracy doesn't sleep, and neither should our vigilance. The question is yours. Will you wait until it's too late, or will you stand, speak, and protect what matters? This story shows us that democracy, freedom, and justice are never guaranteed. They depend on the vigilance and courage of every single citizen. Silence in the face of wrongdoing. Even a small lapse can allow injustice to grow. Your voice, your vote, your action matters. Standing up for what is right isn't always easy, but it's what keeps the world just and fair. If you believe in protecting the truth, exposing injustice, and standing up for democracy, then this is the place for you. Subscribe to our channel, Mr. Expose Stories, and join a community that uncovers the truth the mainstream media won't show you. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an eye-opening story. Your voice matters. Your action matters. Don't stay silent. Be part of the change today.